Namaste, and welcome to our continuing series on the life divine with our beloved Ranga. We are continuing in the chapter Knowledge by Identity and Separative Knowledge, and we are on page 569, beginning with the sentence, "Ignorance becomes complete."
So, as usual, we will read the summary of what you have said in the previous para, so we get the continuity. This knowledge by direct but separative cognition still retains some trace of the identity. It is in the region of divided being with an underlying base of unity that it operates. This region is the subliminal and the spiritual mental planes above the reason. The absolute knowledge by identity belongs to the highest planes of the higher hemisphere. In the lower planes of the spiritual regions, higher mind, illumined mind, intuitive mind, this direct separative cognition is the normal way of understanding. In the subliminal too, it is operative because the inner being is the projection of the spiritual planes in their descent towards the subconscious. Our outer being of body, life and mind is a development from and out of the inconscient. The spiritual planes and the inner being belong to the heights of the spirit. So, the more we live within, inwards and upwards, we move away from ignorance towards a larger knowledge. This is what he has said. In other words, if you live in the spiritual planes of consciousness or in the subliminal, you are moving away from ignorance, going more and more towards knowledge. Now, we read the para, ignorance becomes complete. So, from the spiritual planes, you come down into level 1 of the material world. There, I read the para. Ignorance becomes complete with the entire separation of being, from creature from creature. Okay, that's what it means. The direct contact of consciousness with consciousness is then entirely veiled or heavily overlaid, even though it still goes on within our subliminal parts. Just as there is also, though wholly concealed and not directly operative, the underlying secret identity and oneness. There is on the surface a complete separateness, a division into self and not self. There is the necessity of dealing with the not self, but no direct means of knowing it or mastering it. Nature then creates indirect means, a contact by physical organs of sense, a penetration of outside impacts through the nerve currents, a reaction of mind and its coordinations acting as an aid and supplement to the activity of the physical organs. All of them methods of an indirect knowledge. For the consciousness is forced to rely on these instruments and cannot act directly on the object. To these means is added a reason, intelligence and intuition which seize on the communications thus indirectly brought to them, put all in order and utilize their data to get as much knowledge and mastery and possession of the not self or as much partial unity with it as the original division allows to the separated being. These means are obviously insufficient and often inefficient, and the indirect basis of the mind's operations afflicts knowledge with a fundamental incertitude. But this initial insufficiency is inherent in the very nature of our material existence and of all still undelivered existence that emerges from the inconscience.
Very clear.
Yeah.
Very clear.
So we go on to the next para.
Yeah.
The inconscience is an inverse reproduction of the supreme consciousness. It has the same absoluteness of being and automatic action, but in a vast involved trance. It is being lost in itself. It is being lost in itself, plunged in its own abyss of infinity. Instead of a luminous absorption in self-existence, there is a tenebrous involution in it, the darkness veiled within darkness of the Rig Veda. Tamasa, tama asit tamasa gudham. Tama, darkness is there, hidden by the darkness, in the darkness. Gudham, dive deep inside, which makes it look like non-existence. Instead of a luminous inherent self-awareness, there is a consciousness plunged into an abyss of self-oblivion, inherent in being, but not awake in being. Yet is this involved consciousness still a concealed knowledge by identity. It carries in it the awareness of all the truths of existence, hidden in its dark infinite, and when it acts and creates, but it acts first as energy and not as consciousness. It acts and creates, everything is arranged with the precision and perfection of an intrinsic knowledge. In all material things reside a mute and involved real idea, a substantial and self-effective intuition, an eyeless exact perception, an automatic intelligence working out its unexpressed and unthought conceptions, a blindly seeing sureness of sight, a dumb infallible sureness of suppressed feeling coated in insensibility, which effectuate all that has to be effected. All the state and action of the inconscient corresponds very evidently with the same state and action of the pure superconscience, but translated into terms of self-darkness in place of the original self-light. Intrinsic in the material form, these powers are now possessed by the form, but yet work in its mute subconscious. So, he is explaining the involution of Satchidananda in the inconscient. So, one way of doing it is we read the summary. It's very clear actually what he is saying. There is consciousness in the subconscious and inconscient, but it is sleeping. There is a big difference between the superconscious and the inconscious, only one difference. Otherwise, all the rest are the same. That one difference is light and this is darkness. That is consciousness and this is unconsciousness. That is power, this is power hidden. That is Ananda and there is absence of Ananda here. No suffering, but absence of. In the inconscient, there is no suffering. Suffering comes up with life. So, what are the similarities? That is infinite, superconscient is infinite. The inconscient also is infinite. That is one. There is no many there. Here also it is one. One vast stretch of darkness. That is featureless, this also is featureless. So you can see that it's a mirror image. Okay? There is only one difference, left becomes right, right becomes left in a mirror. And here also light becomes darkness, consciousness becomes unconsciousness. But the remaining, it is absolutely the same. Infinite, infinite, one, one, eternal, eternal, featureless, featureless. Okay? So, I read this summary, it should be enough.
Okay.
Okay? The inconscience is the mirror image of the superconscious, an inverse copy of the supreme luminosity. Both are infinite, eternal, self-involved, self-concentrated seed states. The superconscient is a self-condensed light. The inconscient is a dark, tenebrous self-involvement. The Rig Veda says it's a darkness enveloped in darkness. But this inconscient is an involved knowledge. It is knowledge but involved. All the evolutionary works emerging out of it are executed with an incredibly extraordinary precision which is mind-blowing. It's a blind, faultlessly working mechanism because it has knowledge by identity hidden deep in its roots. It may look like non-existence, but it is really existence in reverse. It has hidden in it the real idea of the supermind, infallibly executing each movement as if fully conscious. We'll explain the real idea a little later. In the first emergence from the inconscience, it is energy that manifests, not consciousness, Shakti or Chit. From the inconscient, first comes out matter, and matter is energy. Then life is second afterwards, yes.
He says, an eyeless, exact perception.
Yes, because there is understanding, there is sight, but there is no. It is eyeless means there is knowledge which is not knowledge at the same time. It is compressed. It is like a jack in the box. You compress it, and the moment you release it, it starts flowering up again. There was a question the other day about the inconscient. So, the inconscient is the divine Sat Chit Ananda, which plunges itself into its opposite by willing it. It wills itself to go into the opposite of itself. But because it is divine, it cannot remain in darkness. It has to move up. But it has itself created the prison. And the creation of the prison by the divine is as powerful as the divine. So, there is no, it's not a play, it's not imagination. It is real. The darkness is real. That is why it takes so long for it to come out. The involution is timeless, but the evolution is in time, but it is very, very slow in the beginning. But at every step, the speed increases. First, for life to come out, it must have taken millions of years. Then, from life, mind comes out less, much less than 1,000,000 years. Now, from mind, supermind, it is also much less. So, when the mother speaks about it as maybe now it will be in 300 years or 1,000 years, it will be apparent. So, as it keeps climbing up, it goes faster and faster and faster. That is what is said in the para.
This is a little bit aside, but you know, I use these diaries when the poems come down. And today I read where Sri Aurobindo says, even if we turn away from the light, we are still progressing.
Yes.
So beautiful.
Yeah.
Huh? And we will always continue to progress.
Yes. Because when you are turning away from the light, you are coming down into the lower planes of your own consciousness, and it is a period of assimilation, he calls it. In a yogi, there is no continuous progression. There is an experience, then there is a fall. There is an experience and there is a fall. So when you fall, it's a period given to you for assimilating what you have experienced above. So the period of darkness, when you are turning away, as you said, it is a period of assimilation. You have to try and bring down that into the lower consciousness. This is exactly what happened with Sri Aurobindo also. When he was in Baroda, he had the experience of the self. The mind became silent and he went to the self. But the knowledge and consciousness that you have there, when you come down to the normal physical body in your body-mind life, then you cannot apply that consciousness here effectively. It takes time. So that's a period of assimilation, and you have to try and get that consciousness back operating at the lower level. Operating at the lower level is not very easy, but it can be done with yoga. It takes time.
Thank you. Next para?
Yeah, we go to the next para. Okay, so we can, in this knowledge, understand more clearly the stages of the emergence of consciousness from involution to its evolved appearance, of which we have already attempted some general conception. The material existence has only a physical, not a mental individuality. But there is a subliminal presence in it, the one conscious in unconscious things, that determines the operation of its indwelling energies. If, as has been affirmed, a material object receives and retains the impression of the contacts of things around it, and energies emanate from it, so that an occult knowledge can become aware of its past, make us conscious of these emanating influences, the intrinsic unorganized awareness pervading the form but not yet enlightening it must be the cause of this receptivity and these capacities. What we see from outside is that material objects like plants and minerals have their powers, properties and inherent influences, but as there is no faculty or means of communication, it is only by being brought into contact with person or object, or by a conscious utilization by living beings, that their influences can become active. Such a utilization is the practical side of more than one human science. But still, these powers and influences are attributes of being, not of mere indeterminate substance. They are forces of the spirit emerging by energy from its self-absorbed inconscience. This first crude mechanical action of an inherent absorbed conscious energy opens in the primary forms of life into submental life vibrations that imply an involved sensation. There is a seeking for growth, light, air, life room, a blind feeling out which is still internal and confined within the immobile being, unable to formulate its instincts, to communicate, to externalize itself. An immobility not organized to establish living relations, it endures and absorbs. It endures and absorbs contacts, involuntarily, inflicts, but cannot voluntarily impose them. The inconscience is still dominant, still works out everything by the secret involved knowledge by identity. It has not yet developed the surface contactual means of a conscious knowledge. This further development begins with overtly conscious life. What we see in it is the imprisoned consciousness struggling out to the surface. It is under the compulsion of this struggle that the separated living being strives, however blindly at first and within narrow limits, to enter into conscious relations with the rest of the world being outside it. It is by the growing amount of contacts that it can receive and respond to, and by the growing amount of contacts that it can put out from itself or impose in order to satisfy its needs and impulsions, that the being of living matter develops its consciousness, grows from inconscience or subconscious into a limited separative knowledge. Quite complicated.
Yes.
So, we will read the summary first and then we'll go into detail. Okay, so armed with this knowledge of the inconscient, we can understand the emergence of the involved powers of the spirit in a graded evolutionary upward movement. what is the knowledge we have of the inconscient? That it is consciousness which is compressed and it is there present but almost sleeping. All the things are there, Sat Chit Shakti Ananda, all are there in the inconscient and slowly emerging. Matter has no mental individuality but only a physical one. So, atoms. In the inconscient, there is no individuality. It's a one. It's a vast oneness, dark oneness. So when matter comes up, individuality starts. And at the highest level again, individuality as understood as the ego disappears and it becomes cosmic individuality. So there is no individuality above, no individuality below. It's only in the middle that individuality is there. Okay, so matter has no mental individuality but only a physical one, atoms. But the hidden presence of the Supreme Spirit is there within matter. It is this presence that imparts qualities, properties to objects. This is very interesting. Okay? Every plant has got some medicinal property, but it's not apparent. Every mineral has got a property. Iron can be very hard, okay? Mercury is liquid, so all it's got properties. Mercury is very fluid, okay? Or take even a very soft material, okay? What is lead? Lead is soft, but it doesn't. It's not apparent. If you look at lead, you won't know it is soft. But when you deal with it, a human being deals with it or somebody, then the property comes out. That's what he's saying. It's with honey. Honey, if you just look at it, it does not reveal its sweetness. But when there is a human being who deals with it, he realizes the sweetness. So all objects in the universe have got properties which are lying unexpressed. Only with contact with others, the properties emerge. That's what he's saying. Okay, so each material object responds to external stimuli on it. It retains these impressions, sanskaras. A spiritual initiate can enter into the object and know its past history, its properties, etc. Okay? There is a sentence given a human. So we'll see what that means. All objects have properties, characteristics, which are its individuality, but cannot express, communicate, or manifest them because of deficiency of instrumentation.
Deficiency of
instrumentation. Human beings have
yes.
instrumentation of the senses and speech. We can communicate our feelings. The animal can communicate its feelings only through sounds, not articulate words. Still it can communicate its anger, its softness, its sweetness and friendship, it can. The animal can, but only through sounds. So the expression becomes more complex and more sophisticated when it comes to man. But in matter, the properties are there, but there is no means of communication. So it remains, honey's sweetness remains unexpressed until it comes in touch with a human being. That's what he's saying. Properties are there, but they are unexpressed. Only when man comes and deals with them, then the properties come out. Okay? But the spirit, being infinite power in origin, at last emerges from the dumb inconscience and insensitivity and flowers out as life and mind. It is here that a limited, indirect, separated knowledge reveals itself. This is what he said in the para. The last para is the next para is the last one of the chapter.
Yes.
So, then I read the last para and then we'll see what he says.
Very good.
Okay. We see then all the powers inherent in the original self-existent spiritual awareness slowly brought out and manifested in this growing separative consciousness. They are activities suppressed but native to the secret and involved knowledge by identity, and they now emerge by degrees in a form strangely diminished and tentative. First, there emerges a crude or veiled sense which develops into precise sensations aided by a vital instinct or concealed intuition. Then a life mind perception manifests, and at its back an obscure consciousness sight and feeling of things. Emotion vibrates out and seeks an interchange with others. Last arises to the surface conception, thought, reason, comprehending and apprehending the object, combining its data of knowledge. But all are incomplete, still maimed by the separative ignorance and the first obscuring inconscience. All are dependent on the outward means, not empowered to act in their own right. Consciousness cannot act directly on consciousness. There is a constructive envelopment and penetration of things by the mind consciousness, but not a real possession. There is no knowledge by identity. Only when the subliminal is able to force upon the frontal mind and sense some of its secret activities, pure and untranslated, into the ordinary forms of mental intelligence, does a rudimentary action of the deeper methods lift itself to the surface. But such emergences are still an exception. They strike across the normality of our acquired and learned knowledge, with a savour of the abnormal and the supernormal. It is only by an opening to our inner being or an entry into it that a direct intimate awareness can be added to the outer indirect awareness. It is only by our awakening to our inmost soul or superconscious self that there can be a beginning of spiritual knowledge with identity as its basis, its constituent power, its intrinsic substance. So, the chapter is over, but what he is saying is that there is a inconscient at the bottom, there is a superconscient on top, and the superconscient has by its own will plunged itself and involved itself in the inconscient, and there is a slow evolution coming out. So, all the properties that are there in the superconscient are also present here, and they emerge slowly one by one. But here they are suppressed and kept suppressed, and so slowly they emerge. These properties exist, but they are not expressive. They cannot be expressed because there is no means of expression.
So when he says the subliminal is able to force upon the frontal mind.
Yeah, that is to say, when your consciousness goes into the intraconscient, it makes a communication. Then, in fact, the intraconscient and the superconscient are always trying to put their knowledge and their consciousness and their everything into you. But the body-mind life of man is so rigid and so fixed that it does not allow these influences to come in. But when it allows it to come in, then the knowledge of the superconscious enter into you. That's what it means by force its way into it and remove the darkness. The light then is stronger than the darkness, and it comes in, and you have an experience. That's what he's saying. So, I will read the
summary of the last two.
The summary of the last one. We see then that all the powers of the spirit are there involved and hidden in a condensed massive darkness which is the inconscient. The inconscient is the foundation and base of the descent of spirit into matter. Okay, this is the base. These powers now emerge slowly and strangely diminished and incomplete. The first to emerge is a veiled sensitivity, plants, unicellular units. Then comes a life mind, manas, with the physical senses. Emotion comes next, and finally reason and mind. So this is the. But the limitation of the reason, the limitations of the reason are obvious. The next stage of the larger knowledge comes with entry into the subliminal and the upward spiritual planes above. Reason, above reason. I read the sentence again. But the limitations of the reason are obvious. The next stage of the larger knowledge comes with entry into the subliminal and the upward spiritual planes above reason, above the mind. Man has to enter deep within himself or climb above his outer nature to attain to the direct but separative knowledge. Direct but separative knowledge is there in the subliminal as well as in the spiritual planes of consciousness. Okay. Finally, there is the knowledge by identity. After crossing a lesser grade of the same power called a derivative secondary power of knowledge by identity. So, the four types of knowledge. At the lowest level, indirect knowledge, separative knowledge. Indirect because senses are coming in. And separative because I don't know you, you are you and I am I. When you go to the spiritual plane of consciousness, you don't use senses, you can use your manas, which is the direct action, and it can sense your consciousness. My consciousness can sense your consciousness, so it is direct. But still, it is your thoughts and your emotions, and so it is direct, separative. You go one more step above, knowledge by identity starts, but at a primary level. And the fourth is perfect knowledge by identity. Knower and known become one, subject and object become one. There is no difference between the knower and the known. So that is knowledge by identity. This knowledge by identity is operating at all the levels, but it is slowly hiding itself, and in the matter it has hidden itself fully.
Could you talk a little bit about the world consciousness?
Yeah.
And how it's working in the world, in our age?
The world consciousness, as I said, at the universal level, the consciousness is, all that we have spoken about is always in the universe only, in the planes of existence. The individual is a miniature universe. There is no difference between the two. Only in the universe it is vastly spread out. In the individual it is infinitely compressed. That's the only difference. The individual is the universe in miniature, and the universe is man in a
compressed,
not compressed, opposite, dilated, it is expanded. Man's consciousness is individual.
Yes.
But when it expands, it becomes a universe.
Ah, yes.
So this is there is ignorance at the lower level, and as you keep going up higher and higher, ignorance turns to knowledge in degrees. Indirect knowledge, direct knowledge, knowledge by identity. So now the question arises, how far is this ignorance operative? At what level can we say that ignorance is no more? In other words, what are the boundaries of the ignorance? If you go deep into yourself, does ignorance disappear? If you go below, does it disappear? If it goes above, it disappears. That is the next chapter, the boundaries of the ignorance. So, he will tell you later on, because he never tells you in the beginning what the answer is, but he will tell you step by step. He will go and show you where the boundary is. So I can tell you from before that the ignorance, even when you keep going higher and higher and higher, it goes right up to the overmind level. Knowledge increases, but the seeds of ignorance are there even at the overmind level. Only when you go into the supermind above that, there is knowledge by identity fully and no ignorance anymore.
No ignorance, yeah.
So this is what he is going to tell us in the next one. And if you go inside, does ignorance disappear? No, it does not. Ignorance is there, but light becomes more and more and more and more as you keep going inside. But ignorance goes at the highest level, up to the overmind, the ignorance is there. In a very diminished manner. Ignorance is less, knowledge is more.
How is the ignorance operative at the higher mind?
In the higher mind, it is much more. The knowledge is much more than in your higher mind. You are in the spiritual plane of consciousness, level 2.
Yes.
Whereas the reason, your mind is at level 1. And what is ignorance? Ignorance is seeing the multiplicity and not seeing the oneness. This is ignorance. I am seeing everything, but I don't see the oneness. It's not a mental knowledge. I know theoretically that everything is one. But I can hardly imagine you and your computer becoming one and that light becoming one with you. But there you see the oneness. So, up to the higher mind level, oneness goes on increasing. And the many also are perceived, but it becomes less and less and less real. So, in the overmind, the multiplicity starts at that level. But still you are in the consciousness of unity. You see the oneness, but also you are beginning to see the waves. In the triple status of the supermind chapter, Srila has explained this. So he says it is like the first status of the supermind is a oneness, a sea which is calm, infinite. That is the first status of the supermind. You see only oneness. Then
the highest status.
Yeah.
First is
the first one is the highest.
Okay.
Then, but if that is static and infinite, how can it produce a universe? It is static. So, it has to, the breakup of the one has to start and starts becoming the many.
In the supermind.
In the supermind. In the supermind only there are these three. So, it is like the sea which is not yet forming waves, but you can see the swell. The first one is absolutely plain, without movement, horizontal movement. In the second status of the supermind, you can start seeing the swellings, not yet the waves. In the third status, the waves are beginning to form, and if a human being experiences these three levels, in the top level, he will see only oneness. He will not see the universe. One aspect of it. In the second one, if he sees, then he will see that I can see the many, but the unity is more than the many. In the third one, the many starts becoming more obvious.
Still in the supermind.
Yes, all in supermind.
Yes.
When it comes to the overmind, the multiplicity starts fully. This is what he explained in that chapter. Or if you want to put it another way, at the primary level, the first level, first status of supermind, no waves, only oneness. In the second one, the wave starts forming. The wave is aware that I am part of the sea. The wave is the individual. So the individual knows that I am part of the whole, and yet there is some individuality, very small individuality. In the second one, the individuality becomes more prominent and the oneness becomes less prominent, in a sense of speaking. Then in the overmind consciousness, the oneness is there in the background, but the multiplicity is there in the front.
But the awareness of the oneness is still there.
Yes.
In the overmind.
Yes.
Very good. Thank you, Ranga.
That's what he will explain in the next chapter. Okay? So, we go now to the the boundaries of the ignorance next time. We stop today?
Yeah, I think we stopped at 5 minutes. Namaste all. We have completed this wonderful chapter, Knowledge by Identity and Separative Knowledge. On Monday, we will begin chapter 11, The Boundaries of the Ignorance.